A paper note is a promise. That was the Chinese discovery, money made of nothing but trust. But a promise raises a question the printers never answered. Who keeps it? Who holds the coins, keeps the records, and stands behind the paper when it comes home? In 1397, in Florence, a wool merchant's son named Giovanni de' Medici put up 10,000 gold florins to answer that question. The business he founded would bankroll kings, install popes, and quietly invent something more powerful than any army: the bank. 97 years later, it would collapse, undone by the very trick that built it. This is the story of the birth of banking, how a bench, a ledger, and a signature learned to create money out of nothing. The word bank does not come from a marble building. It comes from a piece of furniture. In the market squares of medieval Italy, money changers worked at wooden benches. In Italian, banco. Europe was a jigsaw of currencies: florins, ducats, groats, gulden, and any coin might be clipped or counterfeit. So the man at the bench was a human exchange rate. He weighed foreign coins, tested them, swapped them for local money, and took a sliver on every trade. And when a money changer failed, the authorities broke his bench in public, so everyone knew he was finished. Banca rotta, broken bench, bankrupt. From the start, then, banking wore both its faces: quiet power and public ruin. Between them, an industry grew. Deposits came first. Your florins were safer with the bench than under the bed, and the changer kept a book of who paid, who owed, and who could be trusted. Then came the real magic: transfers. Two merchants with accounts at the same bench could settle a debt with a stroke of the pen. No coins moved. Watch that moment closely. Money changed hands, and nothing physical happened at all. The ledger is starting to become the money. There was one problem, and it was the size of God. The medieval church condemned usury, charging interest on a loan, as a sin. Dante placed usurers in the seventh circle of his hell, alongside blasphemers. A merchant could grow rich and still pray. A lender who charged interest gambled his soul. And yet Europe was starving for credit. Wool had to be bought before cloth could be sold. Ships fitted out before cargo came home. Kings needed armies before taxes came in. Everyone needed to borrow, and no one was allowed to lend at a price. So the Italians did what clever people do with a rule they cannot break. They went looking for a loophole, and found a beautiful one. It was called the bill of exchange. A merchant in Florence needs money today. A banker hands him 1,000 florins, and the merchant signs a paper promising repayment in 3 months, in London, in English pounds. On the surface, nothing is a loan. It is currency exchange. Florins now for pounds later, and changing money was honest, permitted work. But look at the exchange rate written on the paper. It is not today's rate. It is tilted gently in the banker's favour, so the pounds repaid in London are worth more than the florins paid out in Florence. The interest is real. It is simply dressed as geography. The church looked, frowned, and mostly allowed it. There was genuine risk in the deal, and risk, the theologians conceded, could be paid for. So the bill of exchange became the engine of European trade. Paper promises crossed the Alps in couriers' satchels, while the coins stayed home in vaults. Sound familiar? It is the Chinese lesson again: paper traveling in place of metal. Except no emperor ordered it. It grew from the bottom up, one signed promise at a time. But thousands of promises flying between cities created a new problem. How do you keep track of it all? The answer became one of the quiet masterpieces of human thought. It is called double-entry bookkeeping, and it may be the most boring phrase in the language, so hold on. The idea: every transaction is written down twice, once as a debit, once as a credit, in 2 different accounts. Lend a customer 100 florins. Cash falls by 100, loans owed to you rise by 100. Every event has 2 sides, and the 2 sides must always balance. If the books do not balance, somewhere there is an error, or a thief. For the first time, a merchant could see his whole business as a single, self-checking machine. What he owned, what he owed, and what he was worth, provable to the last denaro. Italian merchants had refined the method for over a century when, in 1494, a Franciscan friar and mathematician named Luca Pacioli, a friend of Leonardo da Vinci, printed it in a textbook and taught Europe what Venice already practiced. But understand what double entry really was. A trust machine. It let a man in Florence supervise a partner in London he might not see for years because the books would confess any sin. It made a business auditable, therefore believable, therefore able to borrow. Rome had legions, China had the printing block, the Italians had accounting, and accounting was the technology banking had been waiting for. One family proved it. Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici founded his bank in Florence in 1397 and built it like nothing before it. Not one bank, a network. Branches in Rome, Venice, Milan, Geneva, Avignon, Bruges, London, each a separate partnership with a local manager who invested his own money and shared the profits. If one branch sank, the losses stopped there, the network sailed on. It was the holding company, invented in the 1400s. And the crown jewel sat in Rome. The Medici became bankers to the Pope, collecting the church's revenues from across Europe and taking their percentage. In some early years, the Rome branch alone produced more than half the bank's profits. The money of God, managed by the trade, God had condemned. With the profits came something no ledger recorded: power. Giovanni's son Cosimo used the bank to become the unofficial master of Florence. No crown, no title, officially just a citizen, while quietly owning the men who held the offices. Medici money built libraries and churches and paid the artists of the Renaissance. Donatello worked for Cosimo. The young Michelangelo would live in Lorenzo's palace. In time, the family supplied 4 popes and 2 queens of France. Think about that arc. A century earlier, lenders hid their interest inside exchange rates to stay out of hell. Now a banking family appointed the men who defined hell, and beneath the palaces and the paintings sat the engine running quietly in ink. Here is the pious version of banking. You deposit 100 florins, the bank guards them, you collect them later. Here is what banks actually learn to do. Depositors almost never come for all their coins at once, so the bank keeps a fraction in the vault and lends the rest, say 90 florins, to a silk merchant. Now follow the money. Your ledger still says 100 and you can spend it by transfer. The silk merchant holds 90 of his own. 100 plus 90, 190 florins now move through Florence, and only 100 ever existed. The bank printed nothing. It minted nothing. It wrote 2 lines in a ledger and 90 new florins appeared in the world. This is the trick at the heart of the whole series, so stay with it. The new money is a loan. When it is repaid, it vanishes again. But while it lives, it is real. It buys silk, pays wages, builds palaces. Multiply that across every deposit in every branch, and a bank becomes a machine that breathes money in and out of an economy. China printed money by decree. The banks of Italy conjured it by agreement, and nobody had to order anything. The catch never changes. It works only while depositors do not all knock at once, and only while the loans are good. Which brings us to how the Medici Bank died. Its great weakness was the client it could not refuse, the prince. Kings did not want bills of exchange, they wanted war chests, and they repaid in favours and trading privileges, when they repaid at all. The London branch lent heavily to King Edward IV during England's Wars of the Roses, and much of it never came back. In Bruges, the branch manager Tommaso Portinari poured the bank's money into Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, a warlord who died in battle in 1477, owing a fortune. Branch by branch, the structure built to contain failure began instead to transmit it. At the center, the 3rd generation was better at ruling than banking. Lorenzo the Magnificent, poet, politician, magnificent by name and by spending, had little patience for ledgers, and the discipline that built the bank leaked away. London closed. Bruges closed. Then, in 1494, a French army marched into Italy. Florence rose against the Medici, and the bank that had financed popes was shut down and picked apart. 97 years after Giovanni opened his books. And here is history's little joke. 1494 was the very year Pacioli's textbook was printed. The bank died in the exact year the manual for running one was published to the world. The family survived, popes and queens still ahead of them. But the bank was gone, and the idea was loose. Because the idea could not be uninvented. Every bank since has been a Medici Bank. Deposits at the bench, loans breathing new money into the world, a ledger where the money really lives. Look at your account today. It is not a pile of notes in a vault with your name on it. It is an entry in a database, a direct descendant of a Florentine ledger. Money began this series as a lump of metal you could bite. Rome taught it to lie about its silver. China taught it to be paper, and Florence taught it the strangest lesson of all. Money does not need to be printed, or minted, or even touched. It can be written into existence by two people agreeing on a number. But once money is just a number in a book, a new question appears. And it is a question about human nature. What happens when the numbers catch a fever? When ordinary people, merchants, weavers, innkeepers, bid a number higher and higher, not because the thing is worth it, but because they believe someone else will pay more tomorrow. Next time, we go to Holland, where the newly rich, newly banked Dutch lost their minds over, of all things on earth, a flower and a single tulip bulb could be priced like a fine canal house. The first speculative bubble in history, and the market madness we have never cured since. Until then, the number in your account is a promise written in someone else's book. Sleep well.